My name is Al D. I'm a person in recovery. And what that means is that I haven't found it necessary to take a drink of drugs since February the 1st, 2018. And for that, I'm truly and eternally grateful. I just want to share a little bit about my life, my pathway, and my journey. I was born in Chicago, Illinois. I grew up in the streets, single parent. It was eight of us, me being the second to the youngest. I was kind of behind the rest of the bunch. I was really a loner and I showed signs of ism from an early age. I was always isolated as a kid, as far back as I remember. I always felt like I was alone. Even in a household with seven brothers and sisters, I always felt alone. I would play alone. I would go and steal alone. I found out that I had a overwhelming desire to possess other people's things at 7 and 8 years old. I remember stealing my sister's gun out of her purse. Um, I also remember going downtown, 8, 9 years old on public transportation. My mom's so busy trying to work two jobs and take care of eight kids. I didn't have a lot of people watching me. I wasn't held accountable. And I would actually go downtown after going up to the neighborhood liquor store. I found out that I was very manipulative at a very young age. I became friends with this guy who owned this liquor store. In the front part of the store, there were the sodas, the candy bars, and the chips and all that. But in the back, where he would go constantly, it was a bar, and he was also the bartender as well as the front counter man. And I would sit around the store and I would talk with him, and he would always try to, tell me the good things and the right things to do, but sitting around and hanging around up there at that store, I seen where this man kept his coins, his quarters, dimes, nickels, his rolls of coins. He would always reach down and break open the roll for the register. So at that point, I stayed as close to him as possible. But I also had started when he would walk into the back to serve his bar customers. I would reach over the counter and take his rolls and rolls of dimes and quarters. And by the time he came back out the back, I would be gone. And he did not catch up with it. I mean, until I found till something else happened. I can't remember exactly what happened, but I had to steal hundreds from that man. And I would take that money and I would go downtown, and I was into those little electric road racing cars and the little Lionel trains, and that's how I entertained myself. And I had this huge train set and road racing set in my basement at my mom's house, and they would come down, my brothers and sisters, and they would see this thing growing. I had put it on an actual big piece of plywood, but nobody questioned me. Nobody asked me, "Hey, where are you getting this money from?" Because my family was I would say dysfunctional. I say that with all humility because it's hard to say your family is dysfunctional. But with my mom working, I had a brother that was in a gang, sisters that were running wild, and it was just that kind of family. So everybody was doing their own thing, and so was I. So, as I, got a little older, that lifestyle of taking other people's belongings, it almost became second nature. I can also remember them passing the church basket around at the church that my mom forced upon us. They would pass the basket around, and then there was a box up front where people would put their tithes. A little box with a little slit in it and a little cross on it. And while everybody at the end of the service was fellowshipping, I noticed those envelopes, you can still get them out of there. And that's what I did. I would take two or three of those envelopes as a little kid, stealing from the house of God. But that was in my sight, that was big money, and it was for a 9 or 10 year old kid. But that became my new thing instead of the liquor store. So what happened ended up happening basically with the liquor stores. I found a new way of getting money. And you know, when I did my fourth step, I found that some of these things that I was doing, I was an addict and an alcoholic. I had the isms out the gate. So, needless to say, I made my own childhood. It could have been a lot rougher and a lot lonelier, but I certainly did my part. Although as bad and as illegal and now all of the above as it was all about satisfying me, you know. And then I grew up with that same mentality, me, into my teens. My first girlfriend, it was all about me, no consideration, having sex with her in her mom's house and forcing her, you know, to be that girl at 15, you know, that got pregnant. And my life just it just became consumed with alcohol and drugs from 14 from 12 on. I mean, the marijuana, the booze farm. I'm a little old, so those things like boom farms and wild Irish rose. That was what I seen others like my brothers and sisters drinking, and I thought that might be something I wanted to try. And at first sip and at first hit of a joint, I fell in love. Um, I really had not developed mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I was just developing into a dysfunctional human being. So as I went through my teens, I had the ability. God had blessed me with the ability to play baseball, and man, I loved it. I played it all the time, and I was really good at it. But what was happening is, and I did not understand it, I did not know it then, that drugs and alcohol was getting in the way of a gift that God had gave me. Um, and as I entered high school, I played baseball. You know, I lived that two lives that I hear so many other individuals talk about in the program, in the 12 step pathway, that I lived two lives. I was this baseball guy. I was cheating to get through school, and you know, everything. I was just so manipulative. But I played baseball, and they people recognized me for that because as a senior in Chicago, you know, I went to a school that was known for baseball, so I got a lot of recognition. I had opportunities for scholarship to the University of Tampa, the University of Florida, Florida A&M. So I mean, I played really good ball. So once finally, I don't know how. Only it had to be the grace of God. I made it through high school. I did graduate. Um, I made it through by the skin of my teeth because, again, I was a cheater. You know, I was either looking at somebody else's paper, getting the answers from somebody. I put very little effort into my education. But as I made it through high school, the drugs had become so prevalent in my life that I was running from drug dealers that I'd taken money from, and you know, in my high school, trying to maintain, scared my family, my poor family, to death. You know, people riding around the house looking for me because I've taken something that wasn't mine. Um, and you know, the high school, I never did actually pursue any of those scholarships. You know, it's just that the pain became greater than the pleasure hanging around Chicago, you know, smoking, drinking, and chasing women. That's what I liked. That's what I liked, and that's what I pursued the most. I'm finding out on this pathway even today. There is a good and there is a bad, and the one I feed the most is going to be the strongest. So I found out that I'd had to get out the streets of Chicago. I seen, and I was seeing my brother get shot and my next door neighbor getting killed. And it was all happening before my very eyes in my early teens that Chicago was a rough place to be. So I started pursuing outside interests like the University of Tampa and Bethune-Cookman, and I end up coming to Florida with little or nothing, just my family gathering up what they could and putting me on a train and saying, "Good luck." That's how I got down to Tampa. And I was at the University of Tampa. I went and tried out at this time because I'm not on the scholarship. I tried out for their baseball team, and Tampa U was really big in those days. What an opportunity! Those guys allowed me to take part of that team. They had gotten me a uniform. But I was looking at my low self-esteem. I was looking at what I was doing because all the time I'm still drinking. I found my own kind, even in Tampa. That's one thing about this addiction. You can put you on a desert island, you will find other alcoholics and addicts, and that's exactly what I did. So I was starting to lose weight. I wasn't going to nobody's class. I would just show up for practice, and you know they were making the final cut. And I went into the coach's office because I'm feeling so unworthy. I say, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and quit at this point. And that man looked at me as I handed him their uniform. He said, hey, man, you had made the team. And I just, at that point, I really didn't care because I had found my best friend and the love of my life, drugs and alcohol, once again in Florida. And that's when I eventually, me not going to class, me not playing baseball, not being able to get a scholarship or any kind of financial funding to pursue the University of Tampa. I ended up dropping out after a year because I just was not financially, and my family was not financially able to keep me and pay my tuition. So upon my exit, I just totally jumped out right over into my own kind. I started running the streets of Tampa. That's where I started using all kinds of intravenous drugs, and man, my life was hell in a handbasket. I was up with all kinds of promiscuous women. That's who basically took care of me. Women. I was linked up with a major drug queen in Tampa. So he put me in apartments, gave me a sawed-off shotgun, and gave me a bag of substance and said, "Now sell it and get busy." And before she before long, she returned. I had no money, no drugs. Um, I had all used it all on myself. And she said, "No, this is not going to work out." And I found myself out in the streets again. And then I went on and moved to Daytona Beach, where I went there and played, got on that baseball team. But with my low self-esteem and my pride with low self-esteem, they have a word for that, and that was truly me. Here I am, egotistical, prideful, don't want to listen to nothing coaches are saying, and I totally got a resentment of a coach because I stole another guy's on the team radio, and they set me down. Me being new to just being an idiot. I had always been an idiot, but I had taken it to a different level. Now I stole one of my teammates' radios and took it to the pawn shop under my ID and on the radio. And of course, when he came and his big boom box was gone, um, they started looking at the pawn shops, and lo and behold, it was there. And yours truly had pawned it. So at that time, they suspended me from the team. They were about to expel me from school, which it didn't matter anyway, because again, in Daytona, I found my own kind. So I just started running the streets of Daytona, selling what drugs I can, borrowing money, trying to stay on top. Met a woman, never had my own place until I was in my 50s. And we're talking in my late and my middle 20s. So I had no apartment in my name. Every woman that I was involved with had to have an apartment, and she had to have a vehicle because I was homeless and I was without a vehicle. And that's how I used people. They were always for my gain, self gain. And as I went through women, as I went through those my 20s, um, I had got to the point where life had became almost unbearable. And I made that call home and said, man, I was 29 then, intravenous drug user, as I say, alcohols, all kinds of substances. And I made that call home and say, it's not working out. I may end up dying down here in Florida. Well, what little funds my mom had, still raising her kids, she had me what she called her baby. Y'all never leave you down there by yourself. And I was back in Chicago. Now I'm back in Chicago as a full blown addict and an alcoholic. Um, and that was not a pretty picture. By then, my brother had recovered from being shot and had recovered from being a gangbanger. Was now making his attempt at the program. He had a few years in the 12-step pathway, and he seen I was in trouble. When he seen me, he said, "Lord have mercy," and that's all I can remember him saying. Because at this time, I left Chicago about 190. I got back home, I was about 160, if that, wet. And he knew something was wrong with his brother. So he tried to introduce me to the program. As a matter of fact, he did. Now, whether I received it or not, you'll see it was about 25 more years before I got it, or was really so. He planted that seed. I remember him coming to get me for my first meeting, and I said, "Well," finally talked me into it. I said, "Well, only way I'm gonna be able to do this is if I go right down here to this store and get me a half a pint of liquor and drink it before I go." Um, and that's just what I did. And because I had no idea how it all works. So, and unfortunately, the meeting was in the basement of a church. It was about 90 degrees, and all you can do is smell the liquor coming out of my pores. But my brother stayed right there with me. He looked at me, and I can clearly remember, vividly remember him saying, "You're in the right place." I didn't understand it then, but I certainly understand it now. And as I did my rest of my 25-year journey, running through people's lives, running through jobs, I could not. I got hired as a manager at a Kentucky Fried Chicken. My first day of training, I was so smoked out till I could not hold my eyes open. And the trainer said, "Man, what's wrong with you? Are you okay?" And all I could do is say, "I'm really not okay. I'm just not feeling well today." And I walked away at that time back in the 80s, to have a $35,000 job, and I'm 29. I mean, that was a really good start. But those people told me that they were going to disqualify me from their management training program. Broke my heart, but just like any other wound, any other pain, I covered it up as long as I could, and I covered it up for years. Because one thing about pain, it's only drugs and alcohol is only a temporary fix. As soon as you sober up, not only do you have that problem, your problem has now had puppies. And I just found that was my case. And not only that job, I was sober up just long enough, 2 or 3 months, to get a nice job. God has always been so. He's always had something for me. He's always been merciful to me. He stayed with me in my darkest hours, but and he would give me jobs that, man, I wasn't qualified for. I just would follow directions. I had sisters that were in school and they would say, "Ah, well, we're going to put you together a resume." I'm 29, 30, man, nothing about no resume. That same resume that we put together, although my jobs were short, it would at least get me in the door. And when people interviewed me, they hired me. And that's how it went. So I would get jobs. I would get jobs. I was one of the maintenance guys in my mom's complex, huge job. I had keys to everything, apartments. But what did I do? I would go into one of the empty apartments and have seizures from using so much drugs and drinking so much alcohol. They would find me. And by radio, they couldn't find me. I just blew every job, and that wasn't an embarrassment to her because everybody in that complex knew I was her son. And my mom's a very prideful lady. And I can remember her crying, saying, "Al, what you're doing, it just don't affect you. It also affects me." And these things I would hear, but I couldn't comprehend. So my mom's that type of lady. She showed me better than she can tell me. She said, "You're not going to be able to stay out here because you're going to eventually end up getting me put out." So I had ran into a gentleman. I went to the Salvation Armies because that's when my mom asked me to leave. That's what I did. I went on the tramp trail. I came introduced to the missions in Chicago, the Salvation Armies. Man, there would be so many people in that shelter. All you can smell is the odor from homeless people, the feet. I can just vividly remember that experience. One I never want to experience again. But to make a long story short, as I was out there on that tramp trail, I met a gentleman named Terry T. He had gotten sober at the Salvation Army. He was over their warehouse, As people bring donations in, they would sort them out and then resell them. You know how the Salvation Army works. And he said, I'm going to Little Rock, Arkansas. They transferring me. He said, do you want to get out of Chicago? And he left, and he gave me his information. And then once the pain got greater than the pleasure in the streets of Chicago and the cold and dark nights, and it was, man, it was so rough. And all my brothers and sisters wanted to help me. They couldn't trust me. As I had got to the point, remember, at an early age, I would take with no regards to people. And when fueled by my addiction, that was really magnified. And I would take from the people that I love, people that were trying to help me. I would turn right around and bite their hand. And, it was like, hey, man, they wanted to help me, but they couldn't for their own safety and well being. So the pain, like I say, just got greater than the pleasure. I thought it'd be time for me to maybe pick the Townsend up on that offer to come to Little Rock, Arkansas, and that's where I spent the last 20 years before my return back to Florida. And through that 20 years, man, I had moments of goodness, but as I was getting great jobs, I'm losing great jobs. I found that I had a calling upon my life, and I've been running from God ever since, and I got that calling that hey, I was to be a mighty man of God, a carrier of His gospel. What an awesome opportunity! What a out of all the people He could have called, I could hear Him loud and clear that you will be my servant, you will be my man of God, and when I heard that, I was 12 years old, and I totally tried to put that on the back burner. And just looking at my past, it would never look at me that me being a minister, a pastor. I was just so far away from that path till I'd never even dreamed it was imaginable. So, but as my spent that 20-year journey, some things were revealed to me in Little Rock, Arkansas. Man, I met some great people. I started meeting people and being able to watch people come in there, come into the 12-step recovery pathways and programs, and their lives changed right before my very eyes. As I was coming in, going out, coming in, they were still there when I came back in, and I was seeing their lives getting better. So I was really introduced to the 12-step recovery pathway in Little Rock, Arkansas. And as I started getting into my 50s, I made my attempt at pastoring a church. But sometimes you cannot, and it really all the time, you can't transmit something that you don't have. I knew I had the gift. I was doing very well at it, but I wasn't living it. I wasn't living that life that I was practicing what I was preaching. It just wasn't there. And as I stayed around and I really got serious and I just totally committed myself. I said, you know what? I need a brand new start. I burned up Chicago. I burned up Little Rock, Arkansas because my past, I mean, it was very difficult for me to start afresh. And I had been there 20 years doing so much mischief. Because it's one thing about people, they will definitely remember your past. And they would all, kind of predict that as being your future. So I said, well, I just need a brand new start. And I always said that I would retire in Florida. And at 58, I came back to Florida. And I tell you, I know that geographical changes don't can't get a person sober because wherever you go, you take you with you. But it was something about when I got back to Florida this last time. I had a spirit of surrender. I had fought a good fight out there. The fight was fixed. I just could not win. And it finally dawned. I had that moment of clarity that I'm either going to straighten up, I'm going to follow the process of a 12-step recovery program because I had seen the miracle in people's lives. I just decided that I'm going to make God my choice. And once I surrendered um, to this way of life, my life has gotten so much better. That hopelessness, that self pity, that uselessness, it has disappeared. Today, as I sit before you, I pastor two churches, one in Clearwater. I oversee a ministry here in Clearwater, and also I personally pastor one in St. Pete. And I also run a sober living house. Things that I could not even imagine could be a part of my life. This 12-step pathway and my total surrender to God. I've turned my will and my life over to Him. Now, that same selfish individual that would take, I find myself giving, giving, giving. And that's the beauty and the miracle of the 12-step process. There is hope. Thank you for allowing me to share my story.